Chapter 2193. Jin Yunlai tried again. The reddish-gold feather gently swept across her forehead, but there was still nothing between her eyebrows. His eyes became cold and stern as he looked at Chu Luiyue with a scrutinizing gaze. "Where's your totem?" "Totem?" Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat as she instantly understood what had happened. She paused for a moment and said, "Seventh Divine Envoy, I don't have a totem." "No?" Jin Yunlai frowned. Chu Luiyue explained, "I came from outside the Divine Ruins world, so I don't have a bloodline totem." Of course she did. Even if she wasn't from the Divine Ruins world, there was indeed a strange totem in her body. Otherwise, when she tested the bloodline power level with the infinite divine dial in the Yuntian Tower, she wouldn't have been able to get a score of 11. However, even she herself didn't know what was going on. From the moment she was reborn in Chu Luiyue's body, that strange pattern had already appeared. At first, she didn't pay much attention to it. Later, when she went to the Divine Ruins world, she found out that it was the so-called bloodline totem. However, that thing came and went sometimes, and even she couldn't control it. She only remembered that when she was in danger, the totem seemed to be burning between her eyebrows. However, it would often disappear very quickly. "You're from outside the Divine Ruins world?" Jin Yunlai looked her up and down, the admiration in her eyes fading in an instant, and even a hint of contempt flashed in her eyes. Although this look dissipated quickly, Chu Luiyue quickly caught it. Her brows furrowed ever so slightly. It was just that she didn't have a bloodline totem. Why did the seventh divine envoy look down on her in an instant? Many people would look at her in a new light when they heard that she came from outside the Divine Ruins world and didn't inherit the bloodline power. Because from a certain point of view, this meant that her talent was stronger than others, which was why she could break through so quickly and reach the God realm. However, this person seemed to be the opposite. Jin Yunlai took out something and handed it over. "Those without a bloodline totem will need to tie this tongue to their bodies when they enter the illusory God Palace." Chu Luiyue took the item and looked at it carefully. It was a small pendant made of red string with a transparent ball the size of a chess piece tied to it. The material of the round ball was neither gold nor jade, it was clear and lustrous. There was a small golden word, illusion, drawn on it. For those without bloodline power, the possibility of ascending to the heavens and becoming a god is almost zero. Originally, you did not have the qualifications to come here, but since you have crossed the bridge, this divine envoy will give you a chance. If you don't meet the requirements of your cultivation within the stipulated time, the words in this ball of tongue will gradually dissipate. When it completely disappears, that is when you leave the illusory God Palace. Do you understand? It turned out that this was something that tested the speed of one's cultivation, and it seemed to have a lot to do with the power of one's bloodline. Chu Luiyue tied the tongue around his waist. "Thank you, seventh divine envoy." Jin Yunlai didn't pay any more attention to him and raised his chin. Next. Compared to before, his attitude was a lot colder. Obviously, he didn't think highly of Chu Luiyue, so much so that he didn't even say half a word. Chu Luiyue didn't care, and stepped over the threshold. At this moment, the water droplet in her dantian suddenly trembled. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately suppressed this fluctuation. Fortunately, this movement was very small, and it didn't attract the attention of the others. She came to a place not far from Song Qing and the others, and calmly waited for the others to come over. "Heh, I didn't think that there would be a time when you Zhu would be defeated," Cheng Pei said in a strange tone. Of all the people who came, only Chu Luiyue received Jin Yunlai's praise. Originally, they all thought that Chu Luiyue would have a meteoric rise. Who knew that just because she didn't have a bloodline totem, Jin Yunlai's attitude would take a 180-degree turn. This time, Chu Luiyue's days in the illusory God Palace wouldn't be easy. Jin Yunlai had already said that it was impossible for her to ascend to the heavens and break through to godhood. "Yu Zhu is a genius, and you've already broken through to godhood at such a young age. We were originally waiting to see Yu Zhu reach the top and take another step forward. Unfortunately, it seems that it's impossible now." "What a pity." Cheng Pei's eyes were filled with unconcealable schadenfreude. Everyone put in so much effort to come here in order to break through the shackles and ascend to a higher realm. But Chu Luiwei had just come here, and before she could do anything, Jin Yunlai had already sentenced her to death. Wasn't this the same as extinguishing all of her chessboard and desires? Chu Luiwei smiled faintly and said, "Cheng Pei, don't feel sorry for me. Even if I can't ascend to godhood in the end with my current godhood, it won't be a problem for me to deal with those who are outwardly strong but inwardly weak." As she spoke, she looked at her hand and said slowly, "I'm sorry. I remember that back then, I almost used this hand to send Family E on his way. But I've always respected the old and loved the young, so I usually won't use such a killing move unless I can't help it." Cheng Pei's face turned red and white at the same time. He wanted to refute, but when he saw Chu Liuyue's nonchalant attitude, he felt some fear in his heart. He was no match for Yi Wentao. When Chu Luiyue was still a high god, she had already taken half of Yi Wentao's life, let alone now that she was a god. Furthermore, when they were in that sea region, everyone had clearly seen that her power was much greater than what they had expected. This Chu Luiyue, they couldn't afford to provoke her. At the very least, it wasn't a suitable choice to fight her head-on now. Cheng Pei took a few deep breaths and flicked his sleeves. "I hope Yu Zhu can always be so confident. Let's see how arrogant she can be after entering the illusory god palace." The others present didn't say anything. They secretly exchanged glances with each other with subtle expressions. Originally, they also wanted to rope in Chu Luiyue, but looking at the current situation, she might even be a burden. If that was the case, they would have to consider carefully. Chu Luiyue pretended not to see the various gazes around her. Of course, she knew that these people had their own thoughts. But no matter what attitude they had towards her, she didn't care much. From the beginning, her purpose here was different from theirs. The fewer interactions they had, the less trouble they would have. She looked at the people who were still outside the door. Behind her was Shang Guanjing. Like Chu Luiyue, he didn't have a totem. Then there was a Tuan Xnz at his waist. After him was Cin Yi. When Jin Yunlai saw him, she was stunned for a moment and then frowned slightly. "You have been to the illusory god palace before?" Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2194. After asking this question, Jin Yunlai was stunned. He must be crazy to ask such a question. The illusion god palace only opened once every 10,000 years. How could this man have been here before? "No." Cin Yi answered calmly. His eyes were calm, as if he didn't care about Jin Yunlai's strange question. Jin Yunlai scanned his forehead. As expected, he didn't have a bloodline totem. He could already tell that the people behind him were close to the Shangguanyu who had just entered. They probably came from outside the Divine Ruins world. He waved his hand in annoyance. Cin Yi held a ball and stepped over the threshold to Chu Liuyue's side. Jin Yunlai looked back again. In that instant, that familiar feeling. It was as if he had seen him somewhere before. But that man's appearance and aura were indeed unfamiliar. "I'm probably mistaken." Jin Yunlai retracted his gaze. Chu Luiyue looked at Jin Yunlai and then at Cin Yi. He asked in a low voice, "Cin Yi, why? Did he ask you that?" Cin Yi smiled faintly. "I don't know either. Maybe he got the wrong person." Chu Luiyue thought about it and also found it strange. "Are you a high god?" At this moment, Jin Yunlai's voice sounded again. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw that Hua Shuangshuang was being checked. Not only did he not have a bloodline totem, he wasn't even a high god. Jin Yunlai frowned and didn't hide his impatience and contempt. "High gods are not allowed to enter. You can go back." Hua Shuangshuang was stunned and then cupped his fists. "Seventh Divine Envoy, may I ask why?" "High gods can't pass through the sea, so they naturally don't have the right to enter the illusion god palace," Jin Yunlai said coldly. "But now that we're here, why can't we enter?" Hua Shuangshuang laughed and asked. Jin Yunlai's expression turned even colder. He glanced at Little Hachi and Chang Wanzhou. "The three of you are all high gods?" Actually, it wasn't that no high gods had entered the illusion god palace before. However, most of them had bloodline totems, and their own bloodline power was extremely strong. However, all three of them were high gods, and if his guess was correct, None of them had a bloodline totem. No one had entered the Illusion God Palace. Seventh Divine Envoy. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. I was the one who brought the three of them here. Although I used some tricks, no one said that I couldn't do that. Now that we're here, it can be said that we're fated with the Illusion God Palace. If you don't allow them to enter just because they aren't exalted gods and don't have totems, then perhaps you shouldn't have set up the sea region below from the beginning. You should have just selected people from the group that you've chosen. Jin Yunlai stared at him coldly. You're quite brave. She dared to talk to him like that. Chu Liuyue's lips curved. I'm just speaking the truth. Also, I'm thinking for you. You said that the Illusion God Palace's heavenly gate opens every 10,000 years to recruit the best cultivators. Although they're not high gods yet, they're all very outstanding. If you let them leave, it'll be a loss for the Illusion God Palace. Jin Yunlai looked like she heard a joke. I've already said that a cultivator without a bloodline totem would never be able to ascend to the heavens and ascend to godhood. Moreover, they aren't even gods now. Since you're so sure, you should let them in. That way, the Illusion God Palace will be fair and it won't affect the overall situation. After all, when the time is up, the words in the letter will disappear. Those without strength will be kicked out of the Illusion God Palace. Jin Yunlai was silent for a moment. His expression changed as if he was thinking about Chu Liuyue's words. After a while, he finally nodded. Then I'll see how long you can stay here. Then he finally wrote down Hua Shuangshuang and the other two's names on the list and gave each of them a letter. When Chang Wanzhou, who was the last in line, also walked in, Jin Yunlai finally said, "Come with me." As he spoke, he took the lead and walked forward. Song Qing looked at the open door and couldn't help but ask, Seventh Divine Envoy, the Heavenly Gate. Once the Heavenly Gate opens, it will last for a year. In this year, anyone who steps on the bridge and comes to the door will be able to enter the Illusion God Palace. Jin Yunlai said without turning his head. Similarly, if you can't reach a certain level in this year, you'll also be kicked out. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. They thought that everything would be fine once they entered, but who knew that it was just the beginning? How could it be so easy to improve? The people who were still rejoicing that they successfully entered became nervous again. Compared to their excitement, Chu Liuyue's mood was much calmer. The one-year deadline wasn't very important to her, because she came here mainly to find Duga Mabao and the other two, as well as Yizhao. Of course, if possible, she also wanted to know what kind of place the Illusion God Palace was. Stepping through the Heavenly Gate, there was an extremely wide road in front of them. This was a road carved out of black jade. Just like the Silver Bridge, there were pieces of silver light quietly flashing on it. They were scattered all over the place, presenting an indescribable sense of beauty. In the chaos, there seemed to be some kind of pattern. But unlike the bridge, these light spots were locked under the black jade stone. An extremely thin layer of translucent jade covered it perfectly. It was enshrouded in balls of light, which were bright and dazzling. Master, these are also Xian formations, right? With previous experience, little Hachi saw this scene and subconsciously associated it with the bridge from before. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. Even if she didn't look carefully, she could confirm that these were indeed Xian formations. And, compared to the ones outside, they were probably higher and not lower. This road leads directly from the Heavenly Gate to the Illusion God Palace. There are countless top-grade Xian formations gathered on it. Regardless of whether it's light or dark, they are all shining like stars and illuminating everything. Jin Yunlai explained indifferently. The Xian formations on it can be cultivated and studied. Everyone was shocked. There are so many, and we can all comprehend and cultivate? One had to know that every high-grade Xian formation was an intangible treasure. Even those who came from first-rate families like them wouldn't be willing to take out their treasures. However, this illusory god palace had directly engraved so many Xian formations on the star path. Jin Yunlai suddenly laughed and looked up. There are countless Xian formations in the Illusion God Palace. I'm not afraid of you seeing them, I'm just afraid that you won't understand them. Chapter 2195. His tone was indifferent and carried a bone-deep arrogance. Everyone was silent for a moment. Although these words made people feel uncomfortable, they had to admit that there was nothing wrong with them. To be able to gather such a shocking number of Xian formations to form a bridge and a path was already enough to explain many things. The foundation of the illusory god palace was probably not something they could imagine. Little Hachi's red lips curled and she almost rolled her eyes. But considering that they were in someone else's territory, she held back. The previously noisy crowd quieted down. At this moment, they finally realized what kind of place they had come to. In the Divine Ruins world, they were undoubtedly the top experts. Their status was respected and they were admired by others. In the end, after coming to this place, they became the lowest-level existences in this place. The change in status was too sudden, and many people found it hard to accept. Even if they had mentally prepared themselves before coming here, who would be able to laugh and admit that they were too weak when it really came to this? Jin Yunlai seemed to know what they were thinking. The corner of his mouth curled up, but there was no smile in his eyes. This divine envoy knows that you are not convinced. But after a long time, you will naturally recognize everything. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the left. In the distance, there was a continuous mountain range. Over there is the herb mountain of the illusory god palace. There are many natural treasures growing there. Whatever you want, you can go and take it. As long as the grade of the pills refined is high enough, you can choose anything you want. It doesn't matter even if you sleep there. A few people couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. This was really big. Jin Yunlai pointed to the right again. They could vaguely see a surging light that seemed to be a lake. And over there is a lightning pool that specializes in refining tools. The Tianlei inside is also inexhaustible. If you have the ability, you can go and try the power of the lightning pool. This time, everyone was completely silent. Such generosity and confidence, it was really hard to not be convinced. As for origin cultivation, it is the simplest. As you can see, there are countless courtyards on both sides of the star path. You can choose any one of them as your residence. You can cultivate there in the future. Chu Liwei looked to both sides and saw that there were indeed houses that were arranged in picturesque disorder. Normally, you can come and go as you please. However, there are two places in the illusory god palace that you cannot go to. Jin Yunlai said as she looked ahead. One is the illusory god's palace up ahead, and the other is the forbidden area behind the illusory god's palace. If you trespass into these two places without permission, the consequences are not something you can bear. Do you understand? Towards the end, his tone became increasingly stern. Everyone's heart trembled. Yes. Thank you for your advice, Seventh Oracle. Chu Liwei followed his gaze and looked in front, but she was instantly dazed. At the end of the star path, a magnificent palace stood quietly. As for this palace, she had seen it before. This was the pavilion in the sky that had once appeared in the Red Moon Desert. However, at this time, without the layer of white fog, everything could be seen clearly. Above the palace, there was a plaque with golden words. The words on it were vigorous and powerful, like a graceful swan, like a swimming dragon. Illusory God's Palace. Digression. Yesterday, I wrote that Taizu had reviewed it. It was considered a small bug and it had been fixed. Continued at 6 p.m., guess Rong Xiu's final identity. Chapter 2196. It was different from the blurry scene she saw before. The palace in front of her was grand, ancient, and filled with a sense of holiness that made people not dare to look at it directly. Although it looked the same on the outside, Chu Liwei inexplicably felt that the aura of the palace of the illusory god was somewhat different. As for what was different, it was hard for her to say. Someone in the crowd also recognized the palace of the illusory god and pointed at it in surprise. Isn't that the one before? Before he could finish his sentence, that person felt an incomparably powerful pressure suddenly descend upon him. He was not prepared at all. He only felt a weight on his shoulders and his legs involuntarily knelt down. Plop. His knees heavily hit the jade road, making a muffled sound. That person sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. Jin Yunlai came in front of him, looked down at him and coldly reprimanded, "The palace of the illusory god is a supreme existence. How dare you point your finger at it and offend it?" That person's face turned white. Only then did he realize that he had just committed a grave mistake. I know my mistake. Please forgive me, God Envoy." Jin Yunlai's eyes were as cold as a knife. His gaze landed on that person's body as if it was solid. Until that person could not take it anymore, he finally slowly opened his mouth. "There won't be a next time." "Yes. Thank you, God Envoy." That person immediately thanked him as if he had been pardoned. Jin Yunlai looked around. "Remember, in this palace of the illusory god, you must pay attention to everything you say and do. That's all I have to say. Take care of yourselves." Everyone bowed their heads in agreement. Jin Yunlai then turned and left, continuing to walk in the direction of the palace of the illusory god. It wasn't until his figure gradually disappeared into the distance that the kneeling man let out a long sigh and staggered to his feet. At this time, his face was already pale and his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. It could be seen how nervous he was just now. However, no one mocked him. Instead, they all had complicated expressions. He had only raised his hand to point at the so-called palace of the illusory god, and he had almost lost his life. The rules of the illusory god palace were extremely strict. Their strengths were about the same. If it were them, they wouldn't be much better off than that man. Feeling the same way, they naturally couldn't relax. "Looks like I have to be careful with my words and actions in the illusory god palace." Song Qing stroked his beard and sighed. Everyone fell silent, and the atmosphere became icy cold and stagnant. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the side. "It's not too late to realize this now." Hearing this, everyone turned their heads to look. In a courtyard not far away, there was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. He had his arms crossed and was leaning against the door, looking over. He had a toothpick in his mouth and looked a little sloppy. However, the aura emitted from his body was much stronger than everyone else's. "There's even one with Tuan X and Z?" The man's eyes swept over Chu Luiwei, saw the letter tied to her waist, and then looked at her face, and suddenly revealed a look of surprise. "Your Eminence is so young? That's impossible, right?" She didn't have a bloodline totem and had broken through to God. Logically speaking, she should be a few decades older, or even over 100 years old. "Little girl, how old are you this year?" he asked curiously. "You look less than 100 years old, right?" "Chu Luiwei, this junior is 18 this year." "18? You're lying, right?" the man said subconsciously. "I say, little girl, you really don't have to be like this. We're all people who have lived for thousands of years. Even if you're over 100 years old, or even older, you're still young to us." Chu Luiwei said, "This junior is speaking the truth." Seeing her calm expression and sincere eyes, the man realized that she wasn't lying. He immediately spat out the toothpick, stood up straight, and carefully sized her up. However, he still couldn't believe it. Seeing that the people beside him didn't react, he suddenly slapped his thigh. "It's really true?" Chu Luiwei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This junior has no need to lie about this. "That's true." The man nodded in agreement, then leaned lazily against the door frame. He looked at her with pity in his eyes. Such great talent. What a waste. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. She had already grasped the meaning of this sentence. The Illusion God Palace has never had a god under the age of 20. You're the first. It's a pity that you don't have a bloodline totem. He shook his head, looking regretful. Chu Luiwei had already heard about this from Jin Yunlai, so she didn't have much of a reaction. "Heh, so there's more than one tongue-tied person." The man's eyes turned, and only then did he see that Sun Yi and the others also had tongue-tied people hanging on them. Counting, there were 6 in total. Most importantly, there were 3 exalted gods among them. "How did you guys get here? Is it so easy to enter the Illusion God Palace now?" Little Hachi was already in a bad mood. When she heard this, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She stepped forward and was about to speak. Chu Luiwei pressed her hand, smiled at the man, and said, We passed the same test as everyone else. Since the seventh divine emissary was willing to let us in, it's enough to prove everything, isn't it? After mentioning Jin Yunlai, the man became much more restrained. He chuckled and said, "You're right. The divine emissaries have always been the most impartial. Don't misunderstand, I don't have any other intentions. I'm just a little surprised." After all, the Illusion God Palace has never let 6 people without bloodline totems in at once before. Even exalted gods were included. Chu Luiyue nodded, indicating that she didn't care. From Jin Yunlai's attitude, she could already guess what kind of treatment they would receive in the Illusion God Palace in the future. She was already prepared, and didn't feel that the other party was deliberately offending her. The other party didn't show any contempt, and even tried to explain himself. This was already good enough. Chu Luiyue cupped her hands and asked, "This junior is Shangguan Yu, may I know senior's name?" The man smiled and shook his head. "No need to call me senior. I'm just a failure who hasn't reached the heavens in 10,000 years. You can just call me Xiao Ran. Here, there's no seniority. As long as you're strong enough, you'll be respected and admired by everyone." Chu Luiyue nodded. She stared at the palace of the illusory god for a moment before turning around and walking towards the courtyard next to it. "Let's go." Since they were already here, they should find a suitable place to stay first. Shangguan Jing and the others quickly followed. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2197. After Chu Luiyue and the rest left, Song Qing and the rest also dispersed and went to find their own residences. The figures on the star path quickly dissipated and became quiet again. Xiao Ran looked at the star path and seemed to be in a daze. After a long time, he turned and went back to his house. As he walked, he muttered, "It's so hard to find a good one, but he doesn't have a totem. Sigh, let's wait and see." The houses and courtyards here were all independent of each other and were quite far from each other. To a certain extent, it was convenient for everyone to cultivate and not disturb each other. When they passed by these courtyards, they would occasionally see some people cultivating. Some people were curious at first and wanted to greet them, but when they saw the tongues on their bodies, they became cold. Many of them did not even hide the contempt and ridicule in their eyes. There were also some who were focused on cultivating and did not pay attention to them at all. So, along the way, no one paid attention to them. Finally, Chu Luiyue found a relatively large courtyard that could accommodate the 6 of them at the same time. After entering the courtyard and closing the door, little Hachi could not help but stomp her feet in anger. "These people are too much. I've been looked down upon for so many years, but not as much as today. Isn't it just that I don't have a bloodline totem? Do they have to do this?" "Of course." Hua Shuangshuang shook her head and sighed. "Have you forgotten what the 7th messenger said? People like us are destined to not be able to reach the heavens and become gods. In other words, no matter how much we cultivate, we will never be able to cross the threshold of becoming a god. In this way, they naturally have nothing to worry about." He grabbed the tongues tied to his waist and weighed them. "Furthermore, we have to constantly worry about the words on it disappearing and the risk of being chased out at any time." Little Hachi snorted. Actually, she understood all this, but she found it unbearable. They had just arrived and they were already despised by everyone. How were they going to survive in the future? These are not important for now. Those who can come in and stay are considered to have completed the first step. Chu Luiyue pinched little Hachi's face to comfort her. "All right, don't be angry. Your wrinkles are coming out. Mistress." Little Hachi hugged her arm and leaned over to her. It's all little Hachi's fault for being useless. Not only did she fail to make Master proud, she even implicated Master and made Master a laughingstock. Chu Luiyue smiled. "This has nothing to do with you. People without totems were treated equally and looked down upon. This was the most fundamental problem. As for the fact that you're not Her Eminence, that's just an excuse. Everyone could see this clearly. Today is your first day here. Everyone, go back and rest. If there's anything, we can talk about it after you've adjusted your condition." Chu Luiyue found a room and walked in. It was obvious that no one had lived here for a long time, but fortunately, it was very clean. As soon as she sat down, Dumpling couldn't help but shout. Ayu! Ayu! For safety's sake, Chu Luiwei set up a barrier around the room before calling Dumpling out. Dumpling threw herself into her arms and asked anxiously, Ayu, did you see clearly if that was Grandpa Patriarch's feather? Chu Luiwei patted her back to comfort her and said softly, Don't worry, it shouldn't be. She was familiar with Yizhao, so she could still distinguish it. When Jin Yunlai swept the feather across her forehead, she paid special attention to distinguish it. She was basically sure that it had nothing to do with Yizhao. Dumpling first heaved a sigh of relief, then became nervous again. But if it's not Grandpa Patriarch's, who could it be? Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. In fact, this was also the question she was thinking about. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast with a revered status. It was difficult for ordinary people to even see it, let alone use its feather as a brush. No matter how powerful the people of the Illusion God Palace were, this was too much. Chu Luiwei pondered for a long time and looked at Dumpling with uncertainty. Dumpling actually, I feel that the feather's aura is a little familiar. Dumpling's grape-like eyes widened as she stuttered, What does that mean? Chu Luiwei took a deep breath. The aura of that feather is very similar to the ancestor's golden feather. Jin Yunlai walked along the Star Road and finally arrived at the Black Jade Square in front of the Illusion God Palace. In the center of the quaint square, there was a piece missing. A person was standing in front of the Black Jade Square with his hands behind his back, gazing deeply. Hearing the sound, he turned around. This was a man who looked to be about 28 or 29 years old. He had handsome features and an elegant temperament. Only his eyes, which were filled with deep vicissitudes of life, showed that he was definitely not as young as he looked. You've brought everyone? Jin Yunlai bowed respectfully. They're all here. Their names have been recorded. As he spoke, he handed over the name list and the golden feather in his hands. The man took the items and flipped open the name list. As he read, he asked, I heard that there are 6 people without bloodline totems? Jin Yunlai said, Yes. 3 venerables, 3 exalted gods. The 3 exalted gods were all brought by a woman named Shangguanyu. Shangguan? The man chuckled. Interesting. Jin Yunlai's expression didn't change. If there are no accidents, the words Antoine XNZ will disappear within a month. At that time, they will also leave. That's a pity. That Shangguanyu should be quite capable. Without a bloodline totem, it's useless no matter how talented they are. They won't be able to stay here for long. That's true. I wanted to take a look, forget it. The man closed the name list. What a pity. What a waste of a good name. Ancestor's golden feather? Hearing Chu Luiyue's words, Dumpling was stunned. But that's not right. There's only one ancestor's golden feather in the clan, and it's with me. Back then, she had obtained this ancestor's golden feather because she had a pure bloodline. She had never heard of there being a second one in this world. Chu Luiwei stared at Dumpling. Are you sure there's only one? I'm sure. Dumpling pointed at her forehead. Everyone uses this one to open their meridians. How can there be 2? Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of this before, but the aura of the one in Jin Yunlai's hand was too similar. There might be something fishy about this. Let's not rush to a conclusion. The most important thing now is to confirm whether Debeo and the others are here. Also, there's clan leader Yizhao. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand. A piece of purple scale armor lay quietly in her palm. Chapter 2198. A faint glow flickered on the scale armor. Then, a strong wave spread out from it. Something seemed to be summoning it from afar. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She looked in the direction of the summoning power and frowned. This summoning came from the palace of the illusory god. At the same time, Dugamabao, who was trapped in the dark cage, suddenly opened his eyes. You is already here? He waved his hand lightly, and there seemed to be waves of light surging in his demonic purple eyes. That connection was instantly cut off. Chu Luiwei looked at the purple scale armor in her hand in surprise. Just now, She clearly felt Debao's aura, but why was it suddenly cut off? Chu Luiwei looked up hesitantly and frowned. This seemed to be Debao's doing? What's wrong? Tuanzi ran over, hugged her thigh, and asked with her head raised. Did you find Grandpa Debao? Chu Luiwei put away the purple scale armor. Yes and no. What she could confirm now was that Debao was indeed in the palace of the illusory god. But for some reason, he couldn't come out and even deliberately cut off the connection between him and her. It seemed that his situation wasn't optimistic. As for Lan Shao and Diwu Zhangze, there was no news at all. The palace of the illusory god was very big, and it would be very difficult to determine where they were. After all, she didn't even have the right to enter the palace of the illusory god. The palace of the illusory god was an extremely sacred and honorable existence here. On the star path, that person just raised his finger and was severely punished. It wasn't hard to imagine how dangerous it would be if she went there recklessly. With her current strength, she would probably be killed by the god envoys before she even reached the door. Dumpling frowned and looked worried. Then are they locked up now? Will they suffer a lot? Chu Luiwei pinched her forehead and sighed helplessly. This should be the only answer. To be precise, the three of them had been locked up since 10,000 years ago. During this long period of time, they were suppressed under the Red Moon Desert, unable to come out at all. This was already an extremely harsh punishment. This time around, for some unknown reason, the three of them were brought here again and continued to be imprisoned. Chu Luiwei vaguely felt that things were much more complicated than he had expected. We can only wait and see. Chu Luiwei looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, can you sense Senior Yi Zhao's aura? Or other clansmen? Dumpling closed her eyes and carefully sensed for a while. Then she shook her head dejectedly. No, there's nothing at all. Chu Luiwei touched her round hair bun. There's no hurry. Since we're already here, we should be able to find some clues. Dumpling pursed her lips. After comforting Dumpling, Chu Luiwei started to meditate in the room. The earth energy here was very rich and pure. Even the Peach Blossom Cove could not compare to it. Apart from other things, this was indeed a holy land for cultivation. Bam! The sound of an explosion suddenly came from outside. Chu Luiwei opened her eyes and got up strangely. Then she went to the window. She pushed open the window and looked outside. She saw a stream of light rushing up in midair. Then it bloomed in midair, forming a bright silver spark. Chu Luiwei took a closer look and realized that she had seen wrongly. That was not an ordinary spark, but a Xian formation. This is a Xian formation from the Star Passage? She muttered softly. Swoosh. Several sounds of something breaking through the air could be heard. In the surrounding courtyards, there were actually people who had soared into the air. Their gazes were focused on the Xian formation that suddenly bloomed. It's an illusory illumination formation? That's a great master-level Xian formation. It's extremely complicated. Last time, I only stared at it for 15 minutes and almost fainted. Who's comprehending the illusory reflection formation? She looks a little familiar. Who else could it be? Mu Yafeng. I remember that she just finished comprehending those great master-level Xian formations. How did she start to break through to the great master level in the blink of an eye? Her goal is to comprehend all the Xian formations on the Star Passage and enter the illusory God Palace. Do you think she has no goals like you? Her aptitude as a Xian master is extremely high. It's not something an ordinary person can compare to. The rest of us can only be envious. Hearing these words, Chu Luiwei's heart moved. She pushed open the door and walked out. Standing in the courtyard, she could see the Xian formation blooming in midair more clearly. It was complicated, beautiful, and dazzling. A great master-level Xian formation was indeed extraordinary. Thinking of the conversation between those people just now, Chu Luiwei cupped her hands towards a middle-aged man not far away and asked, "May I ask the senior, as long as I comprehend all the Xian formations on the Star Passage, I can enter the illusory God Palace?" Hearing Chu Luiwei's voice, the man turned his head and looked over. He sneered softly, "That's right. The Xian formations on the Star Passage are divided into different areas according to their levels. The closer one is to the illusory God Palace, the higher the level of the Xian formation, and the harder it is to comprehend. As long as you can comprehend all the Xian formations on it, you can obtain the qualifications to enter the illusory God Palace. Saying this, his gaze moved to the Tuan Xnz tied to Chu Liyue's waist, carrying a bit of contempt. However, you don't need to think about it. It's impossible. Chu Liyue was startled. Just at this time, a somewhat familiar sloppy voice came from the other side. The lady just came. You guys should be more polite, right? Chu Liyue turned around. Senior Xiao Ran? Xiao Ran lazily leaned against the door frame again. No need to call me senior. Just call me Xiao Ran. Chu Liyue smiled faintly. Xiao Ran said this because he didn't care about these things. However, Chu Liyue had a good impression of him, so calling him senior was still appropriate. Xiao Ran, what does this have to do with you? If you have the time, why don't you think about how to break through? The middle-aged man who was criticized coldly snorted. Again, am I not telling the truth? She doesn't have a bloodline totem and will be driven out in a month. Wanting to comprehend all the Xian formations on the star passage is simply wishful thinking. Xiao Ran nodded. You're not wrong. However, she's not even 20 years old, yet she can come to the illusory God Palace. Who knows how many people who relied on their bloodline power to come here, but couldn't break through. Aren't you the same? That middle-aged man saw that Xiao Ran couldn't win, so he simply stopped arguing. With a wave of his sleeve, he returned to his room. If he had the time, he might as well cultivate on his own. Seeing this, the others didn't say anything. Obviously, they were quite afraid of Xiao Ran. Chu Liyue smiled at Xiao Ran. Many thanks, Senior Xiao Ran. Chapter 2199. Xiao Ran scratched his head. Lady, you're really stubborn. Forget it, forget it. Call me whatever you want. It's just a name anyway. Chu Liyue's smile deepened. Although this Xiao Ran looked lazy, he was quite a nice person. After they came to the illusory God Palace, they had been discriminated against because they didn't have a bloodline totem. Only Xiao Ran treated them equally. And this time, he took the initiative to help. Chu Liyue was indeed very grateful. You don't have to take their words to heart. Xiao Ran crossed his arms and lazily raised his chin. Countless cultivators have come to the illusory God Palace in the past hundreds of thousands of years. But in the end, only a few people were able to completely comprehend all the Xian formations, complete the star path, and enter the illusory God Palace. Although they have bloodline totems, they might not be much stronger than you. Some died before they even finished half of it. What's so great about that? Chu Liyue. Even if you can't stay here forever, it's not bad to use this time to comprehend more Xian formations and increase your strength. Xiao Ran suddenly thought of something and glanced at Chu Liyue. I haven't asked yet. Are you also a Xian master? Also? Chu Liyue nodded. What level? Chu Liyue hesitated for a moment. She was now a great Xian imperial teacher, but after comprehending the shuttle formation recently, she clearly felt that her strength should have increased. But she hadn't tried the specifics yet. Great Xian imperial teacher. Great Xian imperial teacher? This time, it was Xiao Ran's turn to be surprised. He scanned Chu Liyue up and down a few times with a face full of disbelief. I remember that you're only 18, right? This is a great Xian imperial teacher? Aren't you a god? Chu Liyue nodded in surprise. Yes, Senior Xiao Ran, do you think there's a problem? Of course there was a problem. There was a big problem. To be able to break through to the god realm at this age was already 1 in a million. She didn't expect her cultivation as a mystic cultivator to be so outstanding. This could only prove that her talent in these two areas was extremely shocking. Xiao Ran's interest was piqued. I couldn't tell, but you do have some skills. Then you can also try to comprehend the Xian formations on the star path. If you comprehend enough Xian formations, or if your level is high enough, that lump of tongue of yours will also sense it and continue to prolong your time here. This way, you'll have more opportunities to improve your strength. Isn't that great? Chu Liyue nodded. Many thanks for Senior Xiao Ran's reminder. This junior also thinks the same. After a pause, she asked again, Senior Xiaoran, before you, how many people comprehended all the profound formations on the star path and entered the illusory god palace in the end? Yeah. The seventh divine emissary is one of them, the one who brought you in. Jin Yunlai? Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. No wonder Jin Yunlai was so proud when she mentioned the star path. It turned out that she had the right to be proud. She thought for a moment and decided to give it a try. This was the only way to enter the illusory god palace openly. She thanked Xiaoran again, turned around, and headed in the direction of the star path. Xiaoran asked, Hey, you're going now? Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks. Yeah. Even if she could wait, Debao and the others might not be able to. Seeing her anxious look, Xiaoran thought she was worried that the words on the lump of tongue would disappear and she would be kicked out of the illusory god palace. Go, go. It's always good for young people to learn more things. If there's anything you don't know, just ask me directly. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Won't this disturb you? Xiaoran looked up. No, I'm too bored. Chu Luiyue. Then I'll thank you in advance. Xiaoran waved her hand and turned back to the house. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and headed toward the star path. The star path started from the door and extended all the way to the illusory god palace. The place where Chu Luiyue lived was coincidentally near the door. In other words, the section where the Xian formation level was relatively low. Since she wanted to comprehend it all, she naturally had to start from the beginning. Chu Luiyue came to the door again. The black jade path under the door was covered with specks of light. Chu Luiyue stepped on it, looked forward, and took a deep breath. This path was very long, and she didn't know how long it stretched. Only the illusory god palace at the far end stood tall, sacred and noble. Hey, someone wants to comprehend the Xian formation from the beginning? Is she planning to walk the star path? I don't know. Is she new? Yes, she's new. Do you see the lump of tongue on her waist? Looking at her age and appearance, she should be the Shangguan Yu who brought the 3 high gods here? So it's her? Without a bloodline totem, why did she come to the star path? She might as well use this time to find some precious Xian formations to finish her study. Chu Luiyue's arrival attracted a lot of attention. Many people from both sides of the star path came out to take a look. Obviously, they didn't think highly of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue ignored these voices and looked down at the first speck of light under her feet. She flicked her finger, and a ray of force flew out and landed on the speck of light. Sensing it, the speck of light quickly became clear. A complicated and dazzling Xian formation appeared in front of her. This was a Xian formation at the level of a Xian King Master. 1,000 Leaves Formation. Chu Luiyue recognized it at a glance. Then, with a thought, several rays of light flew out from her fingers and intertwined in the air. In a few breaths' time, an identical Xian formation was completed. She pushed her palm lightly, and the Xian formation floated down and landed on top of the 1,000 Leaves Formation, perfectly overlapping. Bang! A cluster of silver sparks flew up. 1,000 Leaves Formation, broken. The noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. After a while, someone exclaimed, So fast? They didn't even have time to see what had happened, and the 1,000 Leaves Formation had actually exploded? That's a Xian King Master level Xian formation. It's not difficult. It'll be difficult to move forward after that, someone explained. That's true. Maybe, bang. Before the crowd could finish speaking, they heard another explosion. A cluster of silver sparks bloomed on top of Chu Luiyue's head. Because this Xian formation's level wasn't high, the commotion wasn't as great as the previous illusory illumination formation. However, the spectators standing nearby were still shocked when they saw this. Even if this was only a Xian King Master level Xian formation, it was still too fast. Looking at this formation, she should be a great Xian King Master, right? I heard that she's not even 20 yet. Isn't this talent too strong? So what? Without a bloodline totem, everything is just a waste. If I were her, I definitely wouldn't waste time on this. All kinds of voices entered her ears. Chu Luiyue continued forward as if she didn't hear them. Chapter 2200. To the current Chu Luiwei, a Xian King Master level Xian formation was indeed not difficult at all. Although she had never seen most of the Xian formations here, she could still analyze them at a glance and quickly use them. Bang, bang, bang. On the Star Road, explosions sounded one after another. The surrounding crowd still had various methods at first, but they all shut their mouths in the end when they heard the sound of sparks bursting out continuously. When Chu Luiwei used dozens of Xian formations without any hindrance, she was still full of energy and had no intention of stopping to rest. Everyone finally realized that their initial predictions seemed to be completely wrong. This woman's strength was clearly far beyond their imagination. Time slowly passed as Chu Luiwei walked forward step by step. More and more people came out to watch from both sides. When Chu Luiwei drew the 100th Xian formation, someone finally couldn't help but ask, "How many are there already? Why doesn't she have any intention of stopping?" Using so many Xian formations in one go, even a great Xian King Master can't take it, right? No one answered. Because at this moment, they had the same doubts in their hearts. For so many years, it wasn't that no one in the illusory God Palace had done this. In fact, there were many people who tried to walk the Star Road. But it was really rare to see someone so fierce right from the start. Chu Luiwei's expression was calm and focused. The flowing light in her hand didn't seem to stop as it flew out continuously and condensed into new Xian formations. There were at least tens of thousands of Xian formations on this Star Road. This was just the beginning. Time passed quickly. In a side hall of the illusory God Palace, Jin Yunlai put down the book in her hand and stood up to go outside. Looking from afar, one could vaguely see a slender and exquisite figure on the Star Road, walking forward step by step. Silver sparks flew into the air, illuminating the path ahead of her with dazzling light. She still hasn't stopped? A hint of surprise flashed across Jin Yunlai's eyes. She already knew about this from the moment Chu Luiwei stepped on the Star Road. She originally thought that she was ignorant and fearless, so she tried to start from the beginning. However, from the looks of it now, he did indeed have some confidence to dare to do so. "Is that your Shangguanyu from before?" A gentle and elegant voice came from behind her. Jin Yunlai looked back and wasn't surprised that he suddenly appeared here. She nodded. "I originally thought that she would stop soon and give up. But I didn't expect. She should still be at the stage of Xian King Master level, right?" "Yes. But that's the least. The real difficulty is yet to come." "That's still very. This speed is speed compared to your speed back then." Jin Yunlai Pai paused slightly. She is indeed very talented in this aspect. "That's even more unfortunate," the man laughed. "However, this way she will be able to stay here for a while longer. I'm curious as to where she can go." Set's expression. S. Bai Yayu. Without a bloodline totem, she is destined to not be able to enter the illusory God Palace. Mu Yafeng, on the other hand, has already comprehended more than half of the Xian formations at the Great Grandmaster level. Her future is promising. She's not bad. You should pay more attention. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiwei was still standing on the Star Road. Not only did the words on the letter on her waist not fade, but they were even more vivid than before. Chapter 2201. If this trend continued, she would be able to stay in the illusory God Palace for a long time. More and more people gathered around. In the beginning, most of them only came to join in the fun, wanting to see what kind of waves Chu Luiwei, who didn't have a bloodline totem, could create. However, as time passed, their mentality gradually changed. In the past few days, the strength Chu Luiwei had displayed was already much stronger than many of them. Even though she was still breaking Xian King Master level Xian formations, her speed was extremely fast. From the moment she stepped on the Star Road until now, she hadn't slept or rested for several days straight, constantly comprehending Xian formations. The number gradually accumulated, and it was already very impressive, even shocking. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before she started comprehending great Xian King Master level Xian formations. Bang! A familiar sound was heard. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked forward. A silver spark gradually bloomed in midair, forming an extremely complicated Xian formation. She narrowed her eyes slightly. That Xian formation, why did it look so familiar? Unfortunately, it was too far away, and she couldn't see it clearly. When the crowd heard the commotion, they all turned to look in that direction. Another great master-level Xian formation? Isn't Mu Yafeng's speed a little too fast? It seems like only a few days have passed since she last comprehended it. Yet, with her efficiency, I reckon that she can really comprehend all the Xian formations on this star road, right? I heard that the 7th divine emissary also thinks highly of her. I reckon that she can really succeed. As the Xian formation gradually dissipated, Chu Luiyue also retracted her gaze and continued to study the Xian formations under her feet. Compared to the liveliness on Chu Luiyue's side, Mu Yafeng's side was much quieter. Both sides of the star road were empty, and there was almost no one. This wasn't because everyone didn't want to come, but because they didn't dare. This road was covered with great master-level Xian formations. Even if it was sealed by a thin layer of black jade, it still emitted a faint pressure. Those with average strength would find it difficult to even walk here, let alone other things. Another reason was that this place was closer to the illusory god palace. Everyone respected and admired it, so they didn't dare to act rashly. Even if they wanted to have a private discussion, they definitely wouldn't choose this place. A young woman who looked to be in her mid-20s was standing in the middle of the road. She was wearing a light green dress and had an elegant appearance. There was a hint of arrogance in her eyes. At this moment, she was slightly raising her head and looking at the profound formation that was blooming above her head. Her eyes were filled with joy. A figure walked over from the front. She retracted her gaze. When she saw who it was, she smiled and bowed. "Greetings, 7th Divine Envoy." Jianghu Lai stood not far away from her. Her usually cold and serious face had a rare trace of gentleness. The Heavenly Net Profound Formation is one of the hardest formations to learn among the Grandmaster-level profound formations. You did well to be able to comprehend it so quickly. Mu Yafeng lowered her head slightly and humbly replied, "7th Oracle, you flatter me. Actually, Yafeng has been stuck here for many years. It was only recently that I was able to comprehend it. The Heavenly Net Profound Formation and the Heavenly Illumination Illusory Formation both started with the word Tian. She obviously knew how difficult it was to comprehend it. To outsiders, she had deciphered these two profound formations in just a few days. In fact, she had tried countless times in private over the years. Therefore, she didn't become complacent in the face of Jianghu Lai's praise. Jianghu Lai's face showed some satisfaction. Mu Yafeng's talent wasn't bad. She was neither arrogant nor rash, which was even rarer. In the illusory god palace, there was no lack of geniuses. However, there weren't many who could walk step by step to the end. This was also one of the reasons why he was particularly optimistic about Mu Yafeng. You have already comprehended more than half of the profound formations here. However, the remaining ones all start with the word Tian. You can't let your guard down. Yafeng understands. Jianghu Lai was about to continue when he suddenly heard a commotion in the distance. His eyebrows moved slightly as he looked up. When Mu Yafeng heard the commotion, she also turned around to take a look. Jianghu Lai murmured, "It seems that they have entered the area of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations." It was really faster than he had expected. This speed had already surpassed Mu Yafeng's back then. Thinking of this, he glanced at Mu Yafeng. Mu Yafeng felt a little baffled and laughed. "7th Divine Envoy, haven't you always only cared about the Xian Masters who entered the area of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations? When did you become so concerned about those who entered the area of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations?" She asked this purely because she really didn't know what was going on. When Chu Luiyue and the others entered the illusory god palace, she was cultivating. After coming out, she directly went to the star passage and continued to comprehend the profound formations. The commotion caused by Chu Luiyue's comprehension of the profound formations was very small. She was very far away and focused on the profound formation in front of her, so she naturally didn't know anything. Jin Yunlai simply explained. It's a newcomer who just stepped onto the star passage 4 days ago. These few words instantly caused Mu Yafeng's expression to change. For days? She asked in disbelief. Jin Yunlai nodded. Only then did Mu Yafeng understand why Jin Yunlai looked at her with such a gaze just now. This newcomer's performance had already surpassed her previous self. It seems that another rare genius has arrived. She paused for a moment and said, but she doesn't have a bloodline totem. Jin Yunlai shook his head, his face expressionless. Even with his strict and picky eyes, that woman was indeed very outstanding. The only pity was that she didn't have a bloodline totem. This cut off all possibilities. Mu Yafeng instantly heaved a sigh of relief in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. Then, it's really a pity. Ignore her. You just have to continue comprehending the profound formations. Mu Yafeng retracted her gaze and smiled lightly. Jin Yunlai glanced in that direction again and quickly turned to leave. After Chu Liwei comprehended the last profound formation at the level of a Mystic Kingmaster, he arrived at the area where the great Mystic Kingmaster's profound formations were. The light spots here were obviously brighter than the previous ones, and the pressure was also stronger. Seeing Chu Liwei arrive, the surrounding crowd became even quieter, and their eyes were almost unblinking as they stared at him. The profound formations from before were basically not difficult to comprehend. But from now on it would be different. Even if she was a great Mystic Kingmaster herself, it would be very difficult for her to comprehend all of these. Not to mention, every time she constructed a profound formation, the mental energy and strength consumed would be much more than before. Chu Liwei sent out a stream of force, and a profound formation instantly appeared under his feet. She lowered her head to take a look and was stunned. This profound formation. Chapter 2202. Seeing Chu Liwei staring at the Xian formation and not moving for a long time, the surrounding crowd couldn't help but gradually become restless. What is she looking at? I don't know, maybe she hasn't recovered yet after suddenly seeing a great Xian King Master level Xian formation? A Xian formation of this level isn't that easy to comprehend, right? Just as the crowd was discussing animatedly, Chu Liwei finally came back to her senses. She raised her hands lightly, and several streaks of light flew out. In terms of quantity, it was clearly much more than before. This also confirmed the crowd's previous guess. She was indeed a great Xian King Master. The silver streaks of light intertwined, and very quickly formed the outline of a circular Xian formation in front of her. Immediately after, a series of complicated patterns also gradually outlined. In less than 15 minutes, that Xian formation was completely displayed. Chu Liwei waved her wrist lightly, and that Xian formation silently fell, completely overlapping with the Xian formation sealed under the black jade. Bang! A silver spark that was much larger than before flew up, and slowly bloomed above her head. The crowd quieted down, and the originally somewhat noisy voices instantly dissipated. The way they looked at Chu Liwei changed again. It can't be, right? How is she so fast? That's the Nether Heart formation. Although it's considered one of the simpler ones among great Xian King Master Xian formations, but it's still a level higher than those just now. Did she see it clearly? She displayed it in the blink of an eye? I've already broken through to great Xian King Master for several years, but I'm not as fast as her. What kind of person has come? Most importantly, she doesn't even have a bloodline totem, and is already so heaven-defying. I really don't dare to imagine what kind of existence she would be if she had one. Fortunately, there are no ifs in this world. Otherwise, with just this move, she would have already crushed countless people, right? Right at this time, a cheerful voice sounded. Oh, it's only been a few days, and the little girl is already here? Chu Liwei turned her head to look, and curled her lips into a smile. Senior Xiao Ran, why are you here too? Xiao Ran laughed as he looked at Chu Liwei with a curious and admiring gaze. I was bored by myself, so I decided to come out for a walk. I didn't expect to see you activating the Nether Heart formation as soon as I arrived. Your speed is indeed fast enough. The levels of the Xian formations in front of him were not high, so it was not difficult to use them. However, this nether heart formation was a genuine Grand Xian King Master level formation, yet she was actually able to comprehend it so smoothly and easily. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips and smiled. It's actually a coincidence. I've seen this nether heart formation before. Oh. Xiao Ran nodded in understanding, and the crowd heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this. It turned out that he had seen her before. If that was the case, it wasn't hard to explain why she was so fast. If it was really the same as before, where one could comprehend it with a single glance, then no one would be allowed to live. Then continue. Continue. Xiao Ran chuckled. When he first heard that Chu Luiyue was a Grand Xian King Master, although he was surprised, he didn't think too much about it. After all, Grand Xian King Masters were not rare in the illusory God Palace. However, only now did he realize that Chu Luiyue's strength in this aspect seemed to be even more outstanding than many Grand Xian King Masters. At the very least, he had never seen anyone who could comprehend all the Xian formations of Grand Xian King Masters in a short 4 days. Mu Yafeng couldn't do it either. Chu Luiyue nodded and continued forward. The Star Road was very lively, but the courtyard where Chu Luiyue and the others were in was very quiet. After little Hachi got up from the bed, she went to Chu Luiyue's room. However, it was empty. There was no one in the room. Looking at the empty room, she stretched lazily and turned to walk back. She happened to see Xin Yi, who had just come out from next door. Little Hachi asked, "Big brother, Master isn't back yet?" Xin Yi nodded. "It's already been a few days," little Hachi mumbled. Then, her eyes lit up as she said excitedly, "If that's the case, doesn't that mean that Master is still walking on the Star Road? Big brother, why don't we go take a look together?" Xin Yi's expression was indifferent. "Not going." "Why not?" Little Hachi was instantly disappointed. She glanced in the direction of the Star Road. "I see that there are quite a lot of people there. They must have been stunned by Master. Let's go join in the fun." Xin Yi looked up and quietly glanced at her. What's there to see about a Grand Xian King Master's Xian formation? Little Hachi pursed her lips. "Big brother, you can't not let others take a look just because you look down on a Grand Xian King Master's Xian formation, right? You're abnormally strong in this aspect, but I'm different from you. You're not a Xian Master, so there's no comparison." Xin Yi reminded, "If you have the time, why don't you think about the things I asked you to refine last time? Have you finished them all?" Little Hachi put her hands on her hips, looking arrogant. "Of course I've finished refining them all." Who was she looking down on? "That's good." Xin Yi's expression was indifferent. "Double it." Little Hachi, "Big brother, little Hachi has been cooped up here for several days. Why don't we let her out for a walk?" Hua Shuangshuang, who heard their conversation, poked her head out of the room. "Why don't I bring her to Herb Mountain for a stroll?" When little Hachi heard this, she instantly perked up. "Herb Mountain? Sure." As expected, second brother is the best to me. Xin Yi glanced at Hua Shuangshuang and paused for a moment before finally nodding. "Double it." Little Hachi's mouth twitched. She just knew that big brother wouldn't relent so easily. "Double it is." "Second brother, let's go. I reckon that when we return, we can still go to the Star Passage to cheer for Master." The two quickly left, heading straight in the direction of Herb Mountain. Xin Yi stared at their backs for a while before turning around. However, he didn't return to his room. Instead, he went to the side. When he entered the room, it was completely silent. Walking around the screen, he saw Chang Wanzhou sitting in a chair with his head slightly lowered. His soft golden hair fell down, covering his eyes and brows. His lips, which were always like roses in the past, were now slightly pale. One of his hands was tightly gripping the armrest of the chair, and his body was trembling slightly as if he was experiencing some kind of pain. Upon closer inspection, one could see that his palm was covered in a thin layer of frost. Xin Yi walked in front of him and turned his wrist over. He separated a bit of force and poured it into his Yuan meridian. After a while, the cold aura on Chang Wanzhou's body quietly dissipated. He exhaled. "Thank you." Xin Yi shook his head and looked at the letter at his waist. The illusion character inside was rich and dazzling, as if something was about to penetrate it. He reached out and brushed his hand over the letter. After a while, the inexplicable aura disappeared by more than half, and the character also faded a lot. This is fine. Chapter 2203. To comprehend a Grand Xian King Master level profound formation, she obviously had to spend more energy and time than before. Chu Liyue's speed had obviously slowed down. Of course, this was only what she thought. In the eyes of the surrounding people, her current speed could already be called abnormal. The way they looked at her changed from the initial disdain and contempt to a complicated look. The illusory god palace indeed hadn't had such an outstanding genius for a long time. However, she didn't have a bloodline totem. This also indicated that no matter how outstanding her performance was, the final outcome was already decided. On one hand, everyone envied her talent, but on the other hand, they felt pity for her bloodline. Of course, the majority of them were thankful for this. However, Chu Liyue didn't care about what they thought. She only had one thought now: to complete the star path and enter the illusory god palace. Bang! A profound formation quickly appeared in front of her, and a silver spark slowly bloomed above her head. Then, she continued to take a step forward. Xiao Ran watched from the side for a while, and finally couldn't help but rub his chin and ask, "Little girl, how did you comprehend that wind-lightning profound formation so quickly?" Chu Liyue didn't even turn her head. Her eyes were still staring at the profound formation under her feet. "Because I've seen it before." The corner of Xiao Ran's mouth twitched. "You've already said this many times." Although these profound formations were of the same level, there was still quite a bit of difference between them. Some were simple, while others were very complicated. The same Grand Xian King Master could comprehend two completely different profound formations, and the time it would take would be very different because of this. Take that wind-lightning profound formation for example. It was definitely the most complicated profound formation of the same level. However, Chu Liyue only looked at it for a short while before successfully copying it and displaying it. One had to know that even he had used half a month's time to completely comprehend it. Many people envied him because of this. However, compared to Chu Liyue right now, even if she said she had seen it before, Xiao Ran still couldn't help but feel defeated. "When I asked you before, you said you've seen it before, and now you say you've seen it before. What a coincidence, you've seen all these profound formations before." How old was she? Even if he had started studying profound formations in his mother's womb, it was impossible for him to have such a wide range of knowledge, right? Many of the Xian formations on the star passage could only be found here. Chu Liyue paused for a moment, as if he was weighing his words. Actually, the profound formations of great Xian King Masters that I have comprehended aren't that many, but there are indeed quite a few that have clashed with the ones here. I guess it's really a coincidence, right? She didn't believe it herself. However, she still spoke in a serious manner, and her face was pure and sincere. "You might not know this, but I've always had good luck." Xiao Ran, everyone was speechless. No matter how good his luck was, it shouldn't be this good, right? Xiao Ran looked at her suspiciously, but he couldn't see anything from her face, so he could only give up. Meanwhile, Little Hachi and Hua Shuangshuang went straight to the Herb Mountain. The so-called Herb Mountain was actually a large stretch of undulating mountain ranges. Towering mountains and precipitous ridges, strange peaks stood in great numbers. Before they arrived, they could already smell the rich medicinal fragrance in the air. Little Hachi's eyes instantly lit up. "Second brother, there's really a lot of good stuff here." Hua Shuangshuang looked at her excited face and laughed. "Are you happy now?" Little Hachi raised her eyebrows and snorted. "Big brother is too old-fashioned. Didn't we just come out for a walk? What's there to worry about? I've been out there alone for the past few years, and I've been living well. Nothing has happened to me. Big brother is doing this for your own good." Humph, I should have called little 13 over. This way, Big brother's energy can be diverted. Hua Shuangshuang coughed. Little 13 has always been obedient and sensible. Big brother has never put in much effort for him. However, Little Hachi, on the other hand, had a jumpy personality and was heartless. They had cleaned up a lot of her messes behind her. Little Hachi's red lips curled, but she didn't refute. "The soul sky fruit?" She casually glanced around and suddenly saw a large patch of soul sky fruits growing on a mountain peak not far away. Soul sky fruits were extremely precious and rare. Even in Peach Blossom Cove and Sanson's small space, there were only a dozen or so of them growing. Little Hachi had asked Sanson for some earlier, but Sanson was unwilling to give them to her. However, at a rough glance, there were at least 100 of them here. "Just nice, I'm in urgent need of these things recently. It's really easy to get them." Little Hachi's figure flashed, and she went straight for the mountain. Hua Shuang followed closely behind. The soul sky fruit stem was very long. It could reach a person's waist, and was about the thickness of a thumb. Layers of palm-sized leaves grew on the rhizome, and a longan-sized red berry grew at the top. This was the soul sky fruit. A sweet fragrance wafted through the air. Little Hachi came closer. Seeing that the soul sky fruit was growing just right, her eyes were filled with joy. She reached out and was about to pluck it when she suddenly heard a voice from the side. "Stop!" Little Hachi paused and looked in the direction of the voice. A woman in a white dress was rushing towards them at high speed. She didn't seem to move at all, but she was already in front of Little Hachi in a few flashes. This woman looked to be about 20 years old. Her appearance was pure and beautiful, and her elegant white dress made her look even more elegant. She stood there like a magnolia. She glanced at Little Hachi, and a hint of displeasure flashed across her eyes. She said, "You can't pluck this soul sky fruit." Little Hachi was stunned. "But didn't the 7th Divine Envoy say that the things on this herb mountain can be used at will? For most people, that's indeed the case. But you're an exception." The woman lifted her chin, and her eyes swept past the tongue on Little Hachi's waist. "People without a bloodline totem are not allowed to use the natural treasures on this herb mountain." Little Hachi's beautiful eyes widened. There was actually such a rule? Wasn't this too much of a bully? Why didn't the 7th Divine Envoy say so earlier? Isn't this a lie? Really, you made me waste my feelings. Little Hachi already had a problem with Jinyun Lai. Now that she heard this, she was even more furious. Impudent. The woman in the white dress's face instantly turned cold. The divine envoys were respected in the illusory god palace. No one dared to disrespect them like this. This woman was truly audacious. Little Hachi. Hua Shuang also rushed over at this time. She pulled Little Hachi and gave her a look. Then, she stepped forward and politely cupped her hands. "Miss, I'm really sorry." I'm not a miss." The woman raised her chin, looking proud and arrogant. "I'm the 8th Divine Envoy, Shu Jing." Chapter 2204. Hua Shuang was stunned. Only now did she understand where the other party's arrogance came from. The 7th Divine Emissary Jinyun Lai was an arrogant person, and this one was even more so. He smiled and said, "The 8th Divine Emissary. So it's the 8th Divine Emissary. Actually, we didn't mean to offend you. It's just that we're new here and don't know many of the rules. If we've offended you, please forgive us." He was tall and handsome to begin with, and his current attitude was very sincere, which made him seem more likable. Shu Jing's expression softened a little, and he said calmly, "The more new you are, the more you don't know, and the more you have to be respectful. This is the illusory god palace, not some random place. You don't have a bloodline totem, so you have to be more careful. The 8th Divine Emissary is right." Hua Shuang immediately agreed. Shu Jing continued, "If you want to use the natural treasures here, it's not completely impossible. A Grand Doctor level pill can be exchanged for one chance." Hua Shuang and Little Hachi's expressions changed slightly. This level of pill was extremely rare. Even Little Hachi didn't have it. And even if she did, this exchange wasn't worth it. Little Hachi was so angry that she laughed. Her red lips curled into a perfect arc, and her beautiful eyes sparkled. "Thank you for your good intentions, but I think we should forget about it. With this little time, I can do anything else. Why do I have to do such a thankless thing? Second brother, let's go. It's the same if we go back and get it from Sanson. Shu Jing only thought that she was stubborn, and said disapprovingly, if you don't have the ability, then don't force yourself. This herb mountain doesn't lack people like you. Especially when they didn't even have a bloodline totem. Lord Divine Emissary, you don't have to worry about this. Little 8 lowered his eyes to admire the nail polish that he had meticulously applied as he said lazily. Anyway, we'll leave after staying here for a while. We'll just treat this as a vacation. But Lord Divine Emissary, you should pay more attention to rest and not get angry. Our master said that women get old quickly if they get angry. You! Shu Jing was furious. Lil 8 was still smiling. With a twist of his waist, he pulled Hua Shuang and left in a carefree manner. The colorful and gorgeous skirt swayed in the wind, and the broken jade beads strung on the colorful string around her wrists and ankles made crisp sounds. Her slender and fair waist was faintly discernible as she walked. It was especially eye-catching and seductive. Many of the surrounding onlookers originally wanted to see a joke, but at this moment, they were all stunned. A natural beauty like Little Hachi could make countless people go crazy with just a look or a curl of her finger. There was an indescribable enchanting aura on her body, like a fatal temptation, but also like a strong and vivid painting, easily entering one's eyes and engraving it into one's mind, unable to be erased. Suddenly, a young man flew over and stopped Little Hachi and Hua Shuang. The way he looked at Little 8 was filled with undisguised eagerness. Miss, I am Liang He. May I know your name? Little Hachi narrowed her eyes and glanced at him. What are you doing? Her voice had always been soft and delicate, but at this moment, it carried a bit of laziness. When Hua Shuang heard it, she knew that she was suppressing her anger. Unfortunately, the man opposite her didn't know and thought that the girl was acting coquettishly. Instantly, half of his body went limp. He hurriedly said, Mississippi, don't misunderstand. I don't have any other intentions. I just want to be friends with you. I just heard that you want the soul sky fruit. I just happen to have a few extra here. How about I give them to you? These words sounded too fake. No one would complain about having too many soul sky fruits. He was clearly trying to please Little Hachi. Little Hachi yawned. She had seen too many of these kinds of tricks and was really bored. If she was in a good mood, she might be happy to say a few more words to him. But now, she was in a very bad mood and almost couldn't suppress her anger. So she couldn't be bothered to talk to him. No need. I'm not interested. With that, she lifted her feet and left. Liang He was instantly anxious. Miss, you really don't want the soul sky fruit? Little Hachi didn't even turn her head. She waved her hand lazily and dismissed him with one sentence. It won't be too late to find me after you bring those soul sky fruits over. Liang He's face stiffened. Little Hachi and Hua Shuang had already left. Shu Jing saw this scene and frowned slightly. In his heart, he was even more disgusted with Little Hachi. What else can this kind of woman do other than seduce men? She's just a mere high god without a bloodline totem. How can she be so arrogant? The 7th oracle actually let this kind of person in. Her figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Little Hachi, aren't we going to the Star Road to see Master? Are you planning to go back? Hua Shuang followed beside Little Hachi. Seeing her change direction, she couldn't help but ask. Little Hachi snorted softly. Why are we going there now? To make things difficult for Master? If Master knew that they were scornfully bullied just now, he wouldn't be in a good mood. It was better to let Master focus on his own matters first. If they went there now, it wouldn't be to cheer them on, but to be discouraged. Hua Shuang sighed. Don't take it to heart. From the moment you stepped into the illusory god palace, you should have expected this situation, right? Jin Yunlai's attitude at the heavenly gate had already explained everything. Little Hachi kicked a stone in front of her away and wrinkled her nose. I just feel disgusted. That Shu Jing is the 8th oracle. I'm Little Hachi. Aren't you deliberately disgusting me? Hua Shuang laughed. Little Hachi's anger was always different from theirs. That's fine. You're prettier than her. Really? Little Hachi's expression finally improved after hearing this. She raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. Hua Shuang suppressed her laughter. Wasn't it very obvious just now? Otherwise, Liang He wouldn't have taken the initiative to come over. After all, Shu Jing was still around at that time. Little Hachi's lips curled up slightly. That's right. Master is the most beautiful person in the world. I'm the same as Master. The two quickly returned to their residence and saw Sun Yi sitting on a stone bench in the courtyard. There was a yellowed piece of paper in front of him with a few stones on it. It looked like he was studying some kind of mechanism. When he heard their footsteps, he looked up, but there was no surprise on his face. Big brother, I was bullied today. When little Eighth returned, he poured out his grievances and told Sun Yi about what had happened in an aggrieved manner. Finally, he concluded, these people are too much. Sun Yi's expression didn't change. When she finally finished, he said mildly, it's just a small matter. Isn't it just a medicinal pill for a great physician? It's not like you can't refine it. Chapter 2205. Little Hachi froze. Her long eyelashes fluttered as she quickly glanced at Sun Yi. Sun Yi dropped the last stone in his hand with a calm expression. Little Hachi instantly exhaled and slumped onto the stone table. Big brother, can't you give me some privacy? She hadn't even said anything. Big brother would know everything. I was still thinking of giving Master a surprise. She grumbled unhappily. Sun Yi glanced at her and asked, can this be considered a surprise? Then the threshold for this surprise was too low. Little Hachi was speechless. This person was too perverted. Sun Yi seemed to have heard her thoughts and asked calmly, what did you say? Little Mina immediately sat up straight and gave him 2 thumbs up with a look of admiration. I said that Big Brother's plans are flawless. He can predict things like a god. He's really amazing. Little Hachi was really impressed. Hua Shuang glanced at Little Hachi and was a little surprised. Little Hachi, I haven't seen you in a few years, but your bootlicking skills have improved. Little Hachi was speechless. Second brother, you flatter me. Your sharp-tongued ability is also better than before. Actually, Hua Shuang wasn't like this at first. Ever since she started raising animals and vegetables with Shifang, she was infected by him. After so many years, she didn't get any better. It's too much of a loss to exchange medicine for those things. I would only agree if there was a hole in my brain. Little Hachi snorted. Even if she could refine it, she wouldn't be willing to do so. Sun Yi nodded. Although Herb Mountain is big, there are only so many things. You have enough for now. It's fine if you don't go. Little Hachi looked at him strangely. Big brother, how do you know all this? You've been to Herb Mountain? Sun Yi paused and put away the items on the table before saying calmly, he calmly said, with your standard, you can only refine these things. As for more, do you need it now? Little Hachi raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction. That's not necessarily true. Then we'll talk about it when you can do it. After saying that, Sun Yi got up and left. Little Hachi stuck out her tongue at his back. In the blink of an eye, it was the second day. On the star passage, Chu Liwei looked at the profound formation beneath his feet and exhaled softly. Then she lifted her foot and left the star passage. When the crowd saw this, there was an uproar. Was he finally unable to persevere and was about to give up? Yo, why aren't you watching anymore? Xiao Ran asked curiously. Chu Liwei smiled. Nothing, I just want to rest. Everyone secretly exchanged glances. Even though he put it nicely, it was probably because he was unable to comprehend it and was trying to find a way out for himself. But this was normal. People who tried to walk the star path often did so there was nothing to say. Moreover, Chu Liwei had comprehended so many profound formations and walked so far in such a short period of time. That's fine. You haven't been back for a few days, right? Change your brain and come back to fight again. Xiao Ran was also very open-minded as he said with a smile. Chu Liwei nodded and thanked him before heading back to her residence. After she left, the crowd of onlookers gradually dispersed. Chu Liwei quickly returned to her courtyard. Master, you're back? Little Hachi was resting on a rattan chair in the courtyard and immediately wanted to get up when she saw her. Just rest. I'll go back and calm down first. Chu Liwa said. Little Hachi blinked and lay back down. Oh, then rest well, master. Chu Liwa returned to her room, locked the door, and took a deep breath. After a long while, she gritted her teeth and said word by word, those are actually the profound formations of a great mystic king master. When she saw them back then, Debeo clearly said that they were profound formations of a mystic king master. Chapter 2206. Chu Liwa felt that he had been deeply deceived. Back then in the Scarlet Moon Desert, how much effort had she put in to comprehend those incomparably complicated profound formations? There were even a few times when he was caught by Debao and scolded because he really couldn't remember. At that time, she only thought that her talent was limited, and she was worried that she would let down Debao's expectations. She felt guilty for a long time. In the end, he had taken something that was far beyond her realm and forced her to cultivate. Unfortunately, she was too innocent at that time. Although she felt that those things were very difficult, she never doubted Debao. Needless to say, Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi definitely knew about it too. They could be considered half an accomplice. Chu Liwa ground his teeth. When I find them, I'll make them pay for this. This means that you've seen all those Xian formations before? Dumpling's soft voice sounded in his heart. Chu Liwa face-bombed. Not really. But, however, the closer she got to the illusory god palace, the more profound formations she saw. At first, she didn't feel that something was wrong, but later on, when she saw those profound formations that Debao called Mystic King Tier profound formations appearing one after another in the area of the Great Mystic King Tier profound formations, and there were quite a few of them, she knew that there was something fishy going on. Sensing her thoughts, Dumpling asked excitedly, if that's the case, doesn't that mean that you will be able to comprehend all the profound formations on the Star Passage in no time? That's great. Chu Liwa pursed her lips slightly. That's why I came back. Previously, it could still be explained as her talent and luck. However, if this continued, everyone would be certain that there was something wrong with her. Although she urgently wanted to enter the illusory god palace and find Debao and the others, she was still worried. If he didn't handle the suspicions and questions of the people around him well, it was very likely that it would cause unknown effects. She hadn't been in the illusory god palace for long and hadn't figured out anything yet. It wasn't wise for her to advance rashly. Let's wait and see how the illusory god palace reacts before making our next move, Chu Liwa said firmly. Originally, she was worried about Debao and the others. All she wanted to do was to enter the palace of the illusory god through the star path. But now, after knowing that she had seen most of the profound formations on the star passage, she was no longer that anxious. Dumpling was confused. Then Dumpling will listen to Ayu. Chu Liwa walked over and sat down. He closed his eyes and rested. For the past few days, she had not slept or rested to cast the profound formation. She had indeed exhausted a huge amount of energy and mental energy. Ayu, let's wait here for a while. Grandpa Debao and the others should be fine, right? Chu Liwa took a deep breath and snorted. They are the only ones who can bully others. How can others bully them? Achoo! Lan Xiao suddenly sneezed. He rubbed his nose and mumbled, "Who is it that thinks of me so much?" Looking around, it was still dark. He sighed and lay back down. Sigh, these days are really too boring. I say, why don't you send a few people over and this young master will help you train them? No one answered. Lan Xiao snorted. Forget it if you don't want to. Back then, so many people begged me, but this young master refused. Now, you missed such a good opportunity. Seriously, you're just a defeated general. All your glory in the past has turned into smoke. Living in the past will only make others pity you. That voice came from afar. Lan Zhao's lips curled up into a sinister smile. You know very well who's living in the past. Miss Little Hachi? Little Hachi was curled up in the recliner and sleeping with her eyes closed. Suddenly, she heard a man's voice coming from outside the courtyard. She couldn't help but open her eyes and look over curiously. A man was standing outside the door, looking over with a nervous and expectant face. This courtyard was very big. There was only a short bamboo fence surrounding the outside, which didn't affect one's vision. Therefore, the people outside could easily see the situation inside the courtyard. It was the same for the people inside the courtyard. "Who are you?" Little Hachi asked blankly. That man instantly felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him, and he looked awkward for a moment. However, he quickly adjusted himself and chuckled. "Miss Little Hachi, I'm Liang He. We met at the Herb Mountain before." Little Hachi blinked and remembered that she seemed to have seen this face before. "Oh, it's you. I'm sorry, my memory isn't very good. Usually, I don't remember people who aren't especially good-looking." Her attitude towards people and objects was the same. She would only pick good-looking ones. She would even pick the petals for bathing, let alone people. This Liang He looked to be around 27 or 28 years old. Compared to ordinary people, he was considered good-looking. However, in Little Hachi's eyes, he was just like a normal person. Liang He was defeated, but he wasn't angry. Because Little Hachi indeed had the right to say that. Moreover, he had fallen in love with Little Hachi at first sight. When he heard this, he only felt that Little Hachi was really cute and straightforward. He wasn't angry at all. "That's fine. I'll come here a few more times in the future. Miss Little Hachi will be familiar with me." Little Hachi suddenly thought of something and looked at him suspiciously. "How do you know my name?" Liang He smiled and said, "Naturally, I went to ask around. Little Hachi is so beautiful that it didn't take much effort to ask. I've offended you a bit. What I've done is a little offensive. Is Miss Little 8 unhappy?" Little Hachi laughed. What's there to be unhappy about? She had seen this kind of thing many times, so she didn't care. Could it be that she could really stay in the illusory god palace while concealing her identity? "Speak, what did you come to find me for? If there's nothing important, I'm going to rest." Yes. Liang He hastily said. "Previously, Miss Little Hachi said that you wanted the soul sky fruit. I came here to give it to you. I've brought all the things that Miss 8 has taken a fancy to." Little Hachi was originally lazy, but when she heard this, she immediately revealed a surprised expression. "All of them? There are more than 100 of them." Liang He chuckled and said eagerly, "That's right. Yes, they're all here." Little Hachi raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a questioning gaze. She said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "Won't the 8th divine emissary be angry if he knows what you've done?" "Miss Xiaoba, you might not know this, but there are many other places on the medicinal mountain where soul heavenly fruits grow. The ones that I have brought are merely a portion of them. Lord Divine Envoy will not be angry about this." Little Hachi smirked at his words. So the 7th divine emissary wasn't lying when he said that he could use anything on Herb Mountain. The one who really didn't want her to take the soul sky fruits was the lofty 8th divine emissary. Chapter 2207. As if reading her mind, Liang He hurriedly said, "Miss Little Hachi, don't be angry. The 8th messenger isn't targeting you, but he's targeting everyone who doesn't have a bloodline totem, right?" Little Hachi replied. Liang He's expression was a bit awkward. "Actually, you can't say that. Guarding the Herb Mountain is the 8th messenger's responsibility. How about this? If you want anything in the future, just tell me and I'll get it for you. How about that?" To him and the others in the Illusion God Palace, there was nothing wrong with the 8th messenger's actions. Besides, Little Hachi was a high god, so the 8th messenger naturally didn't like her. Little Hachi waved her hand. "That's not necessary. I'm not that down yet." Liang He sensed that she seemed to be angry, so he didn't dare to barge in and make her even angrier. "Then, these soul heavenly fruits? You can keep them for yourself." Little Hachi sneered in her heart and lay back down, showing that she had no interest in continuing the conversation. Liang He was a bit embarrassed, but seeing her impatient expression, he could only say, I don't need these things. I'll leave them with Little Hachi. Have a good rest. I'll come back another day." After he finished speaking, he actually really placed the over 100 heavenly soul fruits at the door. With every step he took, he would turn around and leave reluctantly. Hua Shuangshuang walked out of the house and glanced at Liang He, who had already left. Little Hachi, he's kind enough to give them to you. You really don't want them? It's just a bunch of soul heavenly fruits. What's so special about them? Little Hachi rolled her eyes. If I really want something, can't I just snatch it myself? Why would I need someone to give it to me? Besides, there are so many people who want to curry favor with me. If I accept all those things, won't I die of exhaustion? Hua Shuangshuang laughed and nodded in agreement. That's true. All these years, whenever little Hachi wanted something, she would either look for her master or the 13th Yu guard. Anyway, she had someone doting on her, so she had never had to worry about such things. Little Hachi, I think you really need to refine something. The words on your tongue have almost faded by half. Hua Shuangshuang reminded. Little Hachi dragged her voice. I know. Shu Jing returned to the illusory shrine and bumped into Jin Yunlai. Jin Yunlai nodded in greeting and was about to leave. Wait. Shu Jing stopped him. Jin Yunlai turned around. What's the matter? Shu Jing nodded and asked, were you the one who brought in those high gods without bloodline totems? Jin Yunlai's expression did not change. Yes. What's wrong? Shu Jing frowned. Don't you know what's going on? How can such people be let in? For so many years, such people have never come to the illusory shrine. It's really, they crossed the sea, got on the bridge, and reached the divine gate. Naturally, they are qualified to come in. Jin Yunlai interrupted him and stared at him. What, did any of them offend you? Shu Jing suppressed the anger in his heart. No, I just feel that it's strange to see such people in the illusory shrine. Are you doubting me? Shu Jing's heart skipped a beat. He immediately denied it. That's good. Jin Yunlai was much taller than Shu Jing. Standing in front of her, he naturally had a strong sense of oppression. If anyone offends you, you just have to punish them according to the rules. As for what you asked just now, I'll pretend I didn't hear it this time. There won't be a next time. There was a warning in his voice. Shu Jing bit his lips. On the Star Road, Mu Yafeng had been standing in the same place for 3 whole days without moving. She stared at the Xian formation under her feet and frowned. Countless possible patterns were sketched in her mind, but they didn't match. This Xian formation was really difficult to comprehend. She knew very well in her heart that she would not be able to solve this problem without a month or so. It was just that, she had just solved a few Xian formations. If she gave up and went back now, she really felt that she would lose face. She had been on this path for too long. In the beginning, everything went smoothly. But gradually, the Xian formation became more and more difficult to crack. Every step forward required a huge amount of energy and a price. She couldn't remember how many times she had gone back and forth. And every time, the time she stayed on this path became shorter and shorter. The closer she got to the illusory shrine, the more difficult the Xian formation became. It wasn't something she could understand after studying it for a few days. Even if she didn't go back now, she wouldn't be able to move forward for a long time. Although there were no onlookers on both sides of the Star Road, she knew that there were still many people watching her. All her actions and performances here would spread throughout the illusory God Palace in a very short time. Anyway, no matter what she chose, she would inevitably be talked about. If you can't understand it for the time being, you can go back and study it carefully. A familiar voice came. Mu Yafeng looked up and saw the person who came. She bent her knees and bowed. Greetings, 7th Oracle. I want to try again. Jin Yunlai shook her head. This Xian formation is more complicated than you think. Back then, I used a full 3 months to barely understand a little. It was already a year later when I completely understood it. There's no point for you to stay here for a while longer. Hearing this, Mu Yafeng's expression wavered. After a moment, she finally sighed. I'm sorry to disappoint you. That's not true. If this Star Road was really so easy to traverse, there wouldn't be so few people who passed through it in tens of thousands of years. You're already very outstanding. You don't have to give yourself so much pressure. Mu Yafeng's mood finally eased a little. Jin Yunlai's words meant that she was still the one he thought the most highly of. Thank you, Oracle, for your advice. She was about to leave when she suddenly remembered something and looked back. By the way, where is that person now? I haven't heard anything these 2 days. Jin Yunlai's expression was as cold as ever. She already gave up 2 days ago and left the Star Road. I guess she's also stuck in some Xian formation. Mu Yafeng's eyes drooped slightly. That's a pity. I thought she could reach the Grandmaster Xian formation in one go. Jin Yunlai shook her head. You overestimated her. After all, she doesn't have a bloodline totem. You don't have to worry about it. Just focus on comprehending the rest. Yes. In the magnificent hall, Rong Xiu stood with his hands behind his back. Unlike before, he was now wearing a black robe. There was a hint of coldness and disdain on his cold and noble face. Swish. He raised his hand, and a bamboo scroll slowly unfolded in front of him. Rows and rows of names gradually appeared on the surface. It was the Pantheon record. There was a place that seemed to have been burned, and the name was blurry. A faint layer of gold shrouded it. Compared to the last time, the name had moved forward a lot. Chapter 2208. Shrouded in the golden light, the name was blurry and hard to distinguish. However, it contained an inexplicably powerful aura that made it different from the other names on the Pantheon record. Although the difference was very slight, it was real. Rong Xiu raised his hand and his slender fingers brushed over the name. The golden light grew brighter and shrouded the aura within. The aura that was about to overflow was gradually reduced, dissipated, and disappeared without a trace. The sound of footsteps echoed in the spacious hall. Master! Umo stepped forward and saw Rong Xiu summoning the Pantheon record. He couldn't help but be shocked and knelt on one knee. Rong Xiu moved his hand and the Pantheon record was put away. It turned into a stream of light and quickly disappeared. Rong Xiu turned around and looked at Umo. Umo said respectfully, Master, Madam has left the star path and has cracked the gigantic spirit formation. Rong Xiu nodded slightly and didn't seem surprised. Umo hesitated for a moment and asked, Master, the palace of the illusory god? Wait and see. Yes. Umo was certain. It seemed that Master didn't plan to do anything for the time being. Is Jianghu back? Rong Xiu suddenly thought of something and asked. Umo immediately said, Yes. Tell him to stay put. If it's not necessary, there's no need for him to show up. Umo silently cried tears of sympathy for Jianghu in his heart. Since he was exiled, he had been thinking about coming back every day. It wasn't easy for him to wait for this day. But before he could be happy enough, he was grounded again. Sigh, how pitiful. Umo tried his best not to smile so widely. I'll go now. With that, he got up and left respectfully. Soon, only Rong Xiu was left in the hall. Gigantic spirit formation. Rong Xiu's lips curved up into a light smile. Looks like there's no hurry. Chu Luiwei rested in his residence for 3 days. After adjusting his condition, he went out. As soon as he arrived at the door, he saw a lot of natural treasures piled up outside. This is... She glanced at them and found that they were all the more precious ones. She turned around and looked at little Hachi, who was curled up in the recliner. Little Hachi, where did these things come from? Little Hachi didn't even open her eyes. She turned over and mumbled sleepily, Someone gave it to me. Others? Is it a gift? Chu Luiwei blinked. Ever since they came to the illusory god palace, they had been discriminated against everywhere. There weren't many people who were willing to look at them in the eye, yet someone had actually sent them gifts. Moreover, he was very generous. Even from her point of view, this was definitely not a small fortune. Yeah, I think, what's his name again? Oh, I forgot. Chu Luiwei was speechless. Master, that was sent by Liang He. Hua Shuangshuang walked out of the room on the other side and explained as she walked. Liang He. Chu Luiwei was unfamiliar with this name. Although she was also present on the day Liang He came, She was thinking about how De Bao used the Xian formation to trick her and didn't pay attention to anything else. Ever since little 8 and I went to the herb mountain a few days ago, Liang he has been coming over every day. Every time, he would send some herbs over. Little Hachi snorted. I already said that I don't want it, but he insisted. What can I do? The meaning of rejection couldn't be more obvious. Unfortunately, Liang he was also stubborn. He didn't care about being splashed with cold water every day and was very persistent. Although he came to deliver things, he never rashly came in. Every time he would leave after saying a few words. From a certain point of view, he knew his limits. Little Hachi was indifferent to this. Seeing that she couldn't persuade him, she simply let him be. After a long time, he will give up. Chu Luiyue knew that this kind of thing was commonplace for little Hachi, so she didn't want to interfere. She was concerned about another matter. Aren't the things on the herb mountain allowed to be used freely? Why does Liang he still send them over every day? Little Hachi heard this and her body stiffened. Finally, she opened her eyes. Hua Shuangshuang paused for a moment, then briefly explained what happened that day. Although they didn't want to make things difficult for their master, this kind of thing couldn't be hidden. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly after hearing this. There's such a rule? Without a bloodline totem, there were a lot of restrictions in this place. Master, the 7th messenger only said half of what he said that day. According to the 8th messenger, even if you have a bloodline totem, there are certain conditions if you want to use the herbs on the herb mountain. As a celestial physician, you have more authority than the average person. And the higher the rank of a celestial physician, the more freedom you have in the herb mountain and the more herbs you can use. Hua Shuangshuang rubbed her chin. I heard that Liang he is the youngest supreme doctor in the illusory god palace. A supreme doctor was in existence above a grand doctor. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed slightly. She looked at little Hachi and laughed teasingly. Little Hachi, it seems that the one pursuing you this time is a genuine young talent. Little Hachi's red lips curled. His looks are average, no. Chu Luiyue knew that she had always been obsessed with looks, so she was just joking. However, according to this rule, it will be troublesome if we want to go to the herb mountain to get herbs. Although she didn't have any herbs on hand right now, there were clearly many good things on the herb mountain. It would be a pity if she missed this opportunity. Little girl, if you really need herbs, you don't have to go to the herb mountain. Xiao Ran's voice came from outside the door. Chu Luiyue smiled and went to open the door. Senior Xiao Ran, why are you here? Xiao Ran shrugged. It's been a bit boring in the house for the past 2 days, so I came out for a walk. When I passed by, I heard you guys talking about the herb mountain, so I came. Chu Luiyue nodded and asked, what did you mean by that? Xiao Ran bit the toothpick in her mouth and smiled. You guys have been in the illusory god palace for a while, but you don't even know this? There are so many of you, could it be that you've been here all this time and haven't walked around? Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment. Now that she said it, it really was. Seeing Chu Luiyue's reaction, Xiao Ran was speechless and helplessly shook her head. Actually, other than the herb mountain and lightning pool, there are many other interesting places in the illusory god palace. Why you guys always here? As for the herbs, it's not just you guys. Many cultivators who aren't celestial physician or aren't strong enough have the same problem. They usually go to the precious treasure pavilion to buy them. The price is fair and the items are good. Precious treasure pavilion? Chu Luiyue subconsciously said with a surprised expression. Xiao Ran was stunned. Yeah, it's the biggest shop in the illusory god palace. Not only do they have herbs, they also have many other treasures. Why, is there a problem? Chapter 2209. Chu Luiyue came back to his senses and smiled. It's nothing. It's just that the name sounds familiar. I've heard of it before. Xiao Ran didn't mind. Anyway, the name of this place is always the same. Chu Luiyue thought about it and agreed. But it was quite a coincidence. You're saying that there are other treasures besides herbs? Yes. You're new here, so you don't know. Many cultivators in the illusory god palace have a close relationship with the precious treasure pavilion. For example, The higher-ranked celestial physician can take some herbs from the herb mountain. They can sell these herbs through the precious treasure pavilion and make a profit. This way, they can also give it to those who can't take herbs from the herb mountain. Everyone can take what they need, so why not? For example, Chu Luiyue, if he wanted to enter the herb mountain, he had to provide a grand physician-level pill. This was a huge price and not worth it. If he chose to go to the precious treasure pavilion, he could get what he wanted at a lower cost. Overall, this was beneficial to everyone. Except for the 8th Divine Envoy. If that's the case, the 8th Divine Envoy has no objections? Little Hachi and the others only wanted to take some soul sky fruits, but they were rejected by the 8th Divine Envoy. The existence of the precious treasure pavilion would undoubtedly reduce the benefits of the 8th Divine Envoy. But the 8th Divine Envoy actually accepted it? Xiao Ran sneered. Of course she has objections, but it's useless. She can control the herb mountain, but she won't dare to touch the precious treasure pavilion. Why is that? Chu Luiyue was curious. The divine envoys had a very high status in the illusory god palace. What kind of background did the precious treasure pavilion have to not be afraid of them? Isn't it simple? It's because of the person in the precious treasure pavilion. She can't afford to offend him. As Xiao Ran spoke, he looked around, as if he was a little afraid. Actually, very few people dare to mention that person in the illusory god palace. I'm just mentioning it to you today. You know it in your heart. Chu Luiyue had a question in his throat, but he swallowed it down. Thank you. What's there to thank me for? Xiao Ran shook his head unconcernedly. He put his hands behind his head and walked 2 steps before he turned around and said, "Oh right, I see that you're quite talented as a mystic cultivator. If there's anything you don't understand, just look for me. I'm really too bored." Chu Luiyue had heard him say this more than once. He couldn't help but laugh. Definitely. Xiao Ran swaggered away. Yi Xia thought for a moment, then turned around and said, "I'll go take a look at the treasure pavilion." Hua Shuang said, "Mistress, let me go with you." "I'm going too." Little Hachi finally got up from the recliner, yawned, and walked over lazily. Her half-asleep and half-awake appearance was quite charming. Chu Luiyue combed her messy hair and said with a smile, "Little Hachi, you don't have to go since you're so sleepy, right?" "I'm going." "I don't have." There were no more herbs. Little Hachi swallowed the last few words. "Anyway, I'm quite bored here, so I'll go out with Mistress." As she spoke, she hugged Chu Luiyue's arm and leaned her head on Chu Luiyue's shoulder. Chu Luiyue nodded. "Then let's go together." The Illusion God Palace occupied a large area, with rows upon rows of houses and courtyards. Fortunately, the treasure pavilion was in a good location, so they quickly found it. There were many people on the way who were also heading in the same direction as them. When they arrived, they confirmed that those people were indeed heading for the Zhenbao Pavilion. At this time, people were coming and going in front of the treasure pavilion. It was very lively. Chu Luiyue stood still and looked forward. This was an exquisitely carved 3-story building. Just from the outside, one could tell that it wasn't small. There was a plaque with golden words hanging on it, Treasure Pavilion. It really was the same name as Yao Chen's shop, but the handwriting was different. She suppressed the chaotic thoughts in her mind and headed for the treasure pavilion. Quite a number of people looked over. It wasn't that Chu Luiyue and the others were showing off. It was just that the 3 of them were already too conspicuous standing there. Hua Shuang was extremely tall and well-built. She stood out among the crowd. Little Hachi's enchanting beauty was indescribable, and she was born to attract attention. As for Chu Luiyue, she was incomparably beautiful and unrestrained. Her entire body exuded a noble aura that came from her bones. More importantly, the news of her walking the Star Road and reaching the Grand Mystic Emperor Division's Mystic Formation area in the shortest time had already spread like wildfire. Isn't that Sheng Guanyu? That's the one. The one who broke Mu Yafeng's record. I heard that she was trapped by the giant spirit formation a few days ago, so she gave up and went back. I didn't expect to see her here again today. You guys forgot that she doesn't have a bloodline totem. She's probably here to buy herbs or something. The two beside her seemed to be the two people who were chased out of Herb Mountain by the 8th Divine Envoy a few days ago. Little Hachi ground her teeth, her beautiful eyes overflowing with killing intent. Chu Luiwei patted her hand and chuckled. All right, we're here to buy things. Why are you getting angry with them? Let's go in later and see what we want. We'll buy as much as we can. Little Hachi smiled. Master is still the best to me. Chu Luiwei and the others ignored the various gazes around them and entered the treasure pavilion. What did you say? Master told me not to come out for the time being. Jianghu, who was leisurely fiddling with a jade item, looked up in shock when he heard this. It can't be? I just came back. Umo patted him on the shoulder. I'm deeply sympathetic, but this is Master's intention. You know. Yenji's eyes twitched. He pulled his hand down and said expressionlessly, next time when you're expressing sympathy, don't smile so brightly. It'll be more convincing. No matter what, Master has already transferred you back. He just wants you to appear less for the time being. Isn't this better than before? Jianghu looked at him speechlessly and asked weakly, what are you talking about? Did Master say how long it would take? He didn't say. Umo chuckled. Don't worry too much. Since Madam and the rest are already here, it won't be long. Suddenly, Yenji's expression changed. She's here. Umo was stunned. Who's here? Jianghu almost rolled his eyes. Who else can it be? Madam is here. I'll go. Umo immediately became nervous. Then I'll leave first. Be careful. Without waiting for Yenji's reply, he disappeared from the room in a flash. Yenji's face twitched violently. But, what a shameless person. Just like Yenqing. After cursing for a while, Jianghu felt better. But when he thought of that person downstairs, his heart could not calm down. Chapter 2210. The space inside Zhenbao Pavilion was bigger than it looked from the outside. The entire first floor was a huge square exhibition hall. The four walls were inlaid with long cabinets made of white crystals. All kinds of treasures were placed on the cabinets in picturesque disorder. In the middle, there was a spiral staircase. In front of the staircase was a counter. A middle-aged man was standing there. He looked like the person in charge. Other than him, there were no other servants on the first floor. Instead, more than 10 customers were strolling around casually. According to Xiao Ran, Zhenbao Pavilion had a powerful backer. Even the 8th Divine Envoy didn't dare to offend them. It was no wonder that this place looked so relaxed. They weren't afraid of anyone causing trouble. Unless there was something wrong with your head, you wouldn't offend Zhenbao Pavilion. Seeing Chu Luiwei and the others enter, everyone in the room looked over with different expressions. Curiosity, inquiry, disdain. Chu Luiwei was about to walk to the side when she suddenly felt a gaze land on her. Her heart skipped a beat and she looked up. A woman in a long green dress was looking at her. This woman looked to be in her 20s. She had a graceful figure and was delicate and elegant. There was a faint arrogance between her eyebrows. Chu Luiwei didn't recognize her. But the other party's gaze made her feel a little strange. You're Shangguan Yu? She asked softly. Chu Luiwei nodded. Yes. May I know who you are, Sister Yafeng? Why are you greeting this kind of person? Before the woman could speak, a young woman beside her spoke up. As she spoke, her eyes were filled with impatience and disdain as they swept over Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei immediately understood. So it's Miss Mu. Mu Yafeng looked at the woman disapprovingly. Miss Shangguan is extremely talented as a mystic cultivator. You can't be so rude. As she spoke, she smiled faintly at Chu Luiwei. I heard that Miss Shangguan broke the record. I'm really impressed. The woman pursed her lips and said softly. So what? Without a bloodline totem, he wouldn't be able to walk for long. What's there to show off now? Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows slightly. I am but a mere great Xian King teacher, and there is still quite a large gap between me and a great grandmaster like Miss Mu. This admiration is not something I can bear. The woman snorted. At least you have some self-awareness. Mu Yafeng gave her a warning look and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, My sister didn't mean to offend you. Didn't I offend you unintentionally? Little Hachi crossed her arms and chuckled. I really don't know if I should say that Miss Mu's younger sister is too outspoken, or that Miss Mu is not good at disciplining her. Mu Yafeng and Mu Yafeng's expressions changed. Chu Luiwe tugged at Little Hachi and smiled. I'm sorry, our Little Hachi is also a straightforward person. His words left the other party speechless. We still have things to do, so we won't disturb you. As Chu Luiwe spoke, he pulled Little Hachi to the side. Little Hachi, look over here. Is there anything you want? They walked to the other side. How arrogant! The woman shouted in a low voice, unconvinced. Enough. We didn't come here to quarrel. Mu Yafeng said with a frown. That woman sensed that she was really angry, and only then did she stop talking. Mu Yafeng walked to the counter in the middle. The anger on her face had already dissipated and was replaced with a gentle smile. Lord Ming, I heard that the second master has returned? Digression, 6 p.m., that you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.